2 years ago, his son and successor, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, was arrested by the Mexican National Guard, but they were forced to release him after the cartel's troops launched a frontal assault on the city of Culiacan, where he was being held. As I understand it, between 500 to perhaps as many as 1,000 heavily armed cartel gunmen invaded the city, prepared an assault against the communities that housed military families, and threatened to exterminate or at least decimate the civilian population. And in the end, the president of Mexico supported the release of Guzman Lopez to, in his words, avoid a bloodbath. To me, this does not sound like gang warfare or organized crime. It sounds like a kind of civil war. The cartels seem to have grown so powerful that they openly outmatch the army in a contest of force and stare down the state itself in a contest of wills. If that is the case, then should Mexico and its allies be responding to the cartels not as if they were organized crime syndicates, but instead as a species of criminal revolutionaries, the way we respond to totalitarian revolutionaries or fundamentalist revolutionaries in other parts of the world?
Well, when the battle over Culiacan was playing out, I was actually in Afghanistan on one of my many trips there before the Taliban's takeover. And this was the fall of 2019. And by then, the territory of Afghanistan that was not ruled by the Taliban, that was ruled by the government, had shrunk considerably. And I was watching on internet the battle playing out and getting tweets from my friends in Culiacan and elsewhere in Mexico, and thinking this looks like the battles over cities that Afghan people experience in Afghanistan. And so this then raises the question that you pose. To what extent are there really meaningful differences or not between revolutionaries, politically motivated revolutionaries, and criminal groups? And that's an issue that's highly contested among analysts, as are, of course, the implications of what government policy should look like. What should be the differences in how one responds to criminal groups and one responds to political groups. So let me start by saying first that there is no doubt a difference between actors that have ideological motivations. There are differences in the modalities of their behavior and their ambitions and the policy implications. However, it would be erroneous to assume that criminal actors do not have political consequences. They have profound political consequences, particularly criminal actors that are like the cartels in Mexico, that are so violent and that rule territories, people, and economies. I have made several times this point that the Mexican cartels are expanding their governance. They govern not just drug trafficking, they govern people, territories, and legal economies. For example, fisheries in Mexico have been taken over by the cartels. So they do not seek to topple the government in Mexico, but they seek to shape it. And to shape it in ways that both shield them from law enforcement arrests, dismantling, but also privileges them vis-a-vis other criminal groups. And strikingly and very distressingly in Mexico, they also seek to shape the outcome of elections. So we haven't really had cases in Mexico where you would have major drug traffickers running for election. Something that Pablo Escobar in Colombia, one of the world's very famous drug traffickers, did in the 1980s, or less known around the world. Politicians in Kenya, for example, that have long been known to be implicated in heroin trafficking in Kenya, successfully ran for office there. We haven't seen the Mexican narcos do that, but we are very increasingly seeing them to really shape the elections in Mexico. I remember on one of my trips to Michoacan, which is one of the central states in Mexico, very affected by criminal violence and criminal groups. This might have been maybe March 2011. And I was traveling in the so-called Tierra Caliente, some of the rural areas, and spoke with someone who had just been elected mayor of a municipality a few months before that. And that individual essentially told me that the day after he was elected, a bunch of trucks, pickup trucks with armed men, men armed with also weapons, showed up at his house, entered his house and said, okay, mayor, you are going to be giving us this amount of the public budget. You are going to be telling us anytime your state or municipal police forces want to launch these operations, here are the routes where you are not going to interfere with us. Here are the license plates of our cars you're not going to interfere with, and on and on and on. So essentially, who was elected mayor then would be subject to this tremendous pressure from the cartels. And of course, if you would disobey, you would get killed, your family would be killed or tortured. If you obeyed, you got part of the kickbacks, of the criminal kickbacks. Rewind or forward, I should say, a decade to last year's midterm elections in Mexico. And we have reached a stage that it's not just that the criminal groups will show up at the house of the person who is elected local official. They will intensely and aggressively shape who can run for elections in the first place. They will support candidates with money. They will assassinate rival candidates and intimidate rival candidates. They are influencing even that aspect of elections. So they have this thick involvement in political life. Even if they do not seek to topple the government, they very much seek to shape the government and its institutions to favor them. The absence of ideology should not be thought about as the absence of political consequences. And after all, what is more political than who influences bullets and money on the street?